This is the United States Energy Association Power Sector Podcast. I'm your host, Herman K. Trabish. I've covered the power sector since 2006, and I currently report for Utility Dive. My guest is Elliot Mainzer, President and CEO of the California Independent System Operator, or ISO, which is responsible for California's transmission system and energy marketplace. Before Elliot joined the California ISO, he spent over 18 years with the Bonneville Power Administration, including over 6 years as administrator and CEO of the Northwest's transmission system, hydroelectric power, and other energy resources. He was also with Enron from 1999 to 2001, but it wasn't his fault. In this USEA Power Sector podcast, Elliot is going to talk about several important innovations the Cal ISO has made recently in transmission planning and in approvals of new generation and new merchant transmission. He's also going to explain the ISO's response to Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC Order 2222, requiring distribution system resources to be integrated into wholesale energy markets. And he's going to describe breakthrough collaborations between California's energy agencies. Elliot, analysts say that California ISO's innovations in long-term transmission planning are the U.S.'s most well thought through and comprehensive reforms to date, and a potential template for other regions. Can you tell us the key features of the ISO's reforms and how they'll improve transmission planning?
Well, thank you, Herman. It's really nice to be with you, and I appreciate the question. I think for us at the CAISO, we have just definitely bought into the absolute importance of long-term coordinated transmission planning. I think if you look at the infrastructure challenges facing California and other parts of the country, first and foremost, we took the step a couple of years ago to develop a 20-year outlook, really trying to map out the broad sort of structural architecture of the grid over the next 20, 25 years. And then we're now starting to index our shorter term kind of 10-year plans to that longer term architecture. And so really trying to have a kind of a master plan and then working very closely with the state agencies, the local regulatory authorities that do the state level integrated resource planning to make sure that our medium-term transmission plans really reflect the policy choices of the state and that are married to effective reliability planning, effective economic planning, and also making sure that we're using grid enhancing technologies and other sorts of non-wire solutions to produce the most effective transmission plan we possibly can. So the 20-year outlook came out in a couple of years ago. In 2022, just last year, we approved a 10-year transmission plan, about $7.3 billion worth of new infrastructure, about 45 individual projects. And a significant fraction of that is concentrated within the state of California, both inside the heart of the state, a lot of offshore wind development likely over the next 10 years or so. And we've also been focusing on how to support interregional transmission development. The lion's share of the resource development will happen within the state, but there are some really good opportunities to support to be able to access out-of-state renewables from states like New Mexico, Wyoming, Idaho, and to be able to support opportunities both for the utilities inside California and also utilities and independent producers outside of California, and to kind of reinforce the backbone of the Western grid, which is critical for reliability and also to further enhance the value of our Western energy market. So I think in conclusion, yes, we really appreciate the question. We really are very excited about this very collaborative and innovative approach and ultimately trying to get transmission built, energized, and into production.
So essentially, you have a long-term plan, a path that you're going to take so you know where you're going, and then you're breaking it down into shorter pieces so that as things change, you can respond to them. Now, and I want to remind our listeners, excuse me, the reporter in me, our listeners, that we just completed recently a series of podcasts on the ISO's hopes to develop an energy day-ahead market and in the long term, a regional collaboration for the West. But I want to get to something more specific here the ISO planning process selected 45 projects just for the next couple of years to go into that plan. And that creates a teaching moment, I think, for transmission developers doing California dreaming. What were the key elements of those projects that developers should take note of that got them selected?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, those projects are really designed to access the next big generation of resources that we need to onboard so California can stay on track with Senate Bill 100, which is the big, clean energy policy for the state. And they're very much a
Mm.
function of land use planning by the California Energy Commission, and they're the function of the integrated resource planning that comes from the California Public Utilities Commission and other local regulatory authorities in California. The other thing that we've done to get to the heart of your question is we've started to effectively think of our transmission system and our transmission plans on sort of a zonal basis. And so we're saying, look, these are the big zones in Northern California, Central California, Southern California, the coast, offshore, the interior heartland. These are the places where there's either existing capacity or where we're going to be building the transmission system. Transmission really needs to be more of a leading indicator rather than a lagging indicator. It's such
Ah,
long lead time infrastructure. It has to guide the pattern of resource development and really reflect the policy choices of the state. We're also now bringing our interconnection queuing reforms into that framework as well and saying, look, those projects that have advanced into a relatively advanced stage of development and are located in those zones that we're intending to build out the grid consistent with the plan and consistent with state policy are going to likely make their way through the interconnection queue and towards commercial development more quickly than projects that aren't lined up with that plan. So power planning, transmission planning, interconnection queuing, even procurement of new resources all have to be synchronized like one set of gearing. And we're really encouraging folks in the development community to make sure they're paying very careful attention to how we're orchestrating this. And then we're going to be pushing a lot of information in their direction to make sure that they really know what we consider to be the preferred parts of the transmission system that we'd like them to queue up in.
mm. Sounds like you've got it all covered. I mean, location, 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 but also a flag showing where those locations are. So it's again, I can see why folks across the country keep telling me this is the best example yet of a planning process. A different topic, Elliot. C. John White of the Center for Energy Efficiency and Renewable Technology and other veterans of California's energy transition have applauded recent collaborations by the ISO with the California Energy Commission, or CEC, and the California Public Utilities Commission, or CPUC. And you just mentioned a great example of why that is. Can you tell us how those collaborations are creating benefits to bring California uh, better reliability as it integrates clean and distributed energy resources? Maybe a couple of examples of those collaborations?
No, certainly. I think inside California, teamwork is critical to success. The responsibilities for reliability and resource planning are distributed amongst different parties. As the California ISO, we have that principal responsibility of keeping the lights on, right? Right. We operate the grid, we run the energy market, we do the transmission planning. But the California Energy Commission and the California Public Utilities Commission, by statute, have really, really important key responsibilities with respect to load forecasting, choosing new resources, doing the integrated resource plan, running the state level resource adequacy programs. And in order for us to have a truly successful, reliable grid and stay on track with our long-term goals, it requires exquisite coordination. So, this is something, you mentioned my background up north. This is something I think I really developed during my time as Bonneville administrator, partnering with the other federal agencies. I think here in California, it's a little bit more of a state level partnership, but it's something that we've really invested. I've been fortunate to have just fabulous partners and strong leaders on the other side at the PUC and at the Energy Commission. We have a lot of very invested and very well educated stakeholders in the advocacy community. You mentioned John, he's one of them. We've got a lot of folks who are we're very vested. So bringing folks into our stakeholder processes, making sure that we're really coordinating, really listening, and really synchronizing our activities has proven essential. And, just the last few years, you've seen, we've had some very, very challenging operating conditions here in California and across the West. And so working together with the commission, with the PUC, with the utilities, with the independent power producers, with the transmission owners, the distribution entities, working with the governor's office, working with all of our major partners has been absolutely essential to our ability to keep the lights on when we've seen record smashing, temperatures and things and variables that affect us both within California and across the West. And I would just say that, we try to extend that same level of collaboration and partnership and outreach to our partners across the Western United States. We in operating the energy imbalance market and serving as a reliability coordinator, we're very vested and very integrated with others across the West. And that partnership, that kind of team spirit, helps us all keep the lights on.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about other states in California. There's been some significant movement with high voltage merchant transmission projects that have been in development for a decade or more. Transwest Express, SunZia, the Southwest Intertie projects, they're moving. They're going to enable California to both export its abundant and too often curtailed clean energy to other states, and to bring other states clean energy resources to California when California needs it. Can you tell us about those projects and the significance of the breakthroughs for this merchant transmission concept and for high voltage development?
Yeah. No, absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, when you look at California's long-term resource plan and our transmission planning, a very, very significant fraction of investment is going to come within the state. But I think we also recognize, and the planners have recognized, the value of diversification and accessing out-of-state renewables for portfolio diversity and for economic value, and also building out that grid to establish even greater interconnectivity and resiliency in the system. And so and also, I think the West has struggled for a long time with how to get these projects subscribed, how to get them, built and energized, and deal with the cost allocation. And one model that we've sort of developed, particularly in partnership with the Transwest Express entities, is known as the subscriber participating transmission owner model, where the Anschutz Corporation has gone out and for a long time, and after many years of planning by other entities as well, have been able to secure the right-of-way for the Transwest Express line. They've subscribed the transmission capacity itself to a set of merchant wind projects, and they're capitalizing the project. But what we've agreed to do is effectively to bring that project electrically into our system and to operate it, and to make them effectively a subscriber participating transmission owner in our system. But the costs of the transmission will not be allocated into our in-state transmission access charge, but instead will be picked up through long-term power purchase agreements by a combination of entities, both within California and also potentially outside of California, who subscribe the long-term offtake. So it's a wonderful way of accessing resource diversity, helping get a project subscribed with a relatively clean cost allocation model, and to just open up a whole nother piece of interconnectivity for the West. We're also thinking that we may apply that model to the Pattern SunZia line. They have applied also to be an SPTO. And as you mentioned, we're also looking very closely at the SWIP North line. This is another piece of really, I think, valuable connectivity between California up through Nevada into Idaho, which will allow California to access resources to export, and also potentially for our partners out of state to participate in that line. So again, the key thing that's really important for us is, California is a big state. We have a lot of load, we have a lot of demand, we have a lot of resource need, but we're trying to leverage that to really bring multiple benefits to other parties to help them with their resource needs, whether they're utilities, IPPs, et cetera, renewable resource developers, and to continue strengthening that backbone of the Western grid. Every year we work through these tough conditions, whether it's summers or winters, and it's that transmission connectivity and that resource diversity that has just proven so essential to reliability. So we're excited to help get these projects energized and fully subscribed, and then continue to work with folks across the West on even longer term transmission planning. And the planning this is an important period to make that work better. We're working with the West Tech Initiative. We're working with the regulatory community who's looking at cost allocation. We know that FERC will be coming out probably quite shortly with their NOPR on their final rule on transmission planning. But we're also trying to say, look, there has been a lot of transmission planning. Let's get some of these lines built and into production.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Transmission for a long time has been like the weather. Everybody talks about it, nobody does anything about it. But it sounds like California is starting to get things done. It's a topic for another day to get deeper into that. But I want to, in the last few minutes that we have, Elliot, I want to go to the other end of the power system
Mm.
at the distribution system level. FERC Order 2222 was recognized when it was uh, ordered as a breakthrough for distributed energy resources being incorporated into wholesale energy markets, and it led to some of the enthusiasm that brought us to the concept of virtual power plants. But I heard a big solar advocate recently called 2222 a nothing burger. So at the same time, everyone says that the ISO's work on 2222, it could be a template for other regions. So what is the ISO doing with 2222? What can it
Yeah.
teach other regions?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think for a long period of time, certainly even prior to me, and I think these last few years really emphasized. I think we've just been strong believers in diversity of resources and a strong demand, load flexibility capability, strong demand response, and if we can aggregate distributed energy resources and bring them onto the grid, that's another fabulous source of capability. So we've been very supportive of that. I think when FERC structured up Order 2022, there were some elements of the CAISO's approach that were brought into that docket. And then I think last year, I think had the first fully approved Order 2222 tariff by the Commission. So we've really embraced this principle, but there is some truth to the fact that the virtual power plants and the DERs are still, I think, in a relatively early state of development, and I think there's work still to be done in terms of ironing out sort of the jurisdictional issues between the distribution utilities and and the distribution side versus the transmission side. How do they get credit in the resource adequacy programs? And I think the state is really here in California working through those details first still, and we still have a few elements of implementation around some of the aggregations that we're working on. But we stand ready, and I think we're open for business to bring these resources onto the grid as the business case and the different commercial models become a little bit more mature. But we're enthusiastic supporters and certainly hoping to see a strong market for distributed energy resources.
Everything you're saying is just more indication that we're in an energy transition. It's not an energy sudden left turn. It's a process that is going to take some time. And I really am grateful to you, Elliot Mainzer, President and CEO of the California ISO, for sharing insights into new transmission planning, newly approved generation, new interagency collaborations that are driving the transition forward, and cutting edge implementation, or at least a cutting edge direction for implementation of FERC Order 2020 2222. As always, I also want to thank our listeners for taking the time to check out the USEA Power Sector Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with everybody you know our quest for energy transition solutions.